Connecting. So we're recording. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming on this Monday public holiday, the 8th of June. Thank you to Queen, or maybe Queen, the band, for this excellent public holiday. Really appreciate that. Cheers. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that most of us are meeting tonight on the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders play in the fight for climate justice, and acknowledge the very serious things that are happening over in the US that are having an impact on all of us, and the impact that has on people, Aboriginal people and people of colour all around Australia, and the great big rallies that we saw on the weekend were testament to that. If you would like to acknowledge the country that you're on in the chat, somebody's posted that they're on Paramount country. As a little mark of respect, that would be lovely. And so with that, I might hand over to Paz, who is here to talk to us about the new ex-Newstart, now Jobseeker payment, and how we might help to campaign for something that is much more livable as an ongoing payment for those people looking for work through no fault of their own. Paz is the campaigner, the Raise the Rate campaigner at ACOS, and he's also been the Anti-Poverty Network, is it convener in South Australia? Is that right? That's right. Yeah. So we're really happy that you could make it tonight, Paz. This is a really important thing that we're all keen to hear more about, how we can be of assistance in this time when we're really trying to guard against the dreaded snapback that is on the horizon and already starting to happen with the free childcare being withdrawn and so forth. So yeah, Paz, would you like to tell us the higher rate of Jobseeker payment is going?
Great, thanks for the intro and for having me. Before I start, I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on Kaurna land, a land that was stolen and never ceded. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And of course, there can be no discussion about poverty, unlike in Australia, without noting that no group in Australia is more affected by poverty than our First Peoples, both because of the legacies of colonialism and dispossession and genocide, and of course because of the ongoing discrimination that Aboriginal people experience when it comes to employment, housing, welfare policy, and in a whole host of other areas. Like Scabby mentioned, I work for ACOS, the Australian Council of Social Service, who are the peak body representing the community and health sector. And before I moved to ACOS at the start of last year, I spent about 5 years coordinating or convening the Anti-Poverty Network, who are a grassroots community group made up almost entirely of people on income support. I believe the youngest member of the group is a high school student, and the oldest member of the group is an age pensioner in her late 70s, and everyone in between. Very, very diverse group, but led by people with direct lived experience of, struggling on a low income, looking for paid work, which is never easy, but certainly an impossible task at the moment, and dealing with all of the stressful and humiliating Centrelink bureaucracy and all the hoops that people have to jump through and keep jumping through, in order to receive what are, by developed world standards, are very, very small, like income support and payments. Of course, some of those payments have recently been doubled temporarily. I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. One of the phrases that I and many other advocates in this space use is that there's a war on the poor, and that's been true for a very, very long time. Certainly the entire time that I've been active in this space as a campaigner. Like historically, we have a very, very low payments. Normally, the lowest like unemployment payment in the developed world, which has not been raised in real terms, which has not been permanently raised in real terms for 26 years. We have very, very severe mutual obligation requirements. When you like apply for a Centrelink payment, I'm required to look for a certain number of jobs per month. You have regular like appointments with your job agency. You're required to participate in activities which often are not very useful to your job prospects and to your ability to improve your skills. And we know that like huge numbers of people on income support will get their payments cut very often for doing nothing wrong, for missing appointments that they weren't notified of, or appointments that they had a reasonable excuse for missing. So that's the normal picture, that people who are unemployed like have to live on extremely tiny amounts of money and like have to deal with pretty onerous requirements, appointments, work for the dollar, or being funneled into some other activity or training, and of course the huge amount of paperwork and bureaucracy that people have to deal with simply to access those payments. So there's normally a war on the poor. Right now, you might say we're in the middle of a bit of a ceasefire, because of course with coronavirus and the economic shutdown that the government rightly imposed in order to slow down the spread of the virus, we've seen a more than doubling of the number of people who are unemployed, from 700,000 to something like 1.5 million now. And what we've seen is the creation, temporarily, but we want to make it permanent, of a far less punitive and stressful, inadequate safety net. So not only has Jobseeker been doubled from 280 a week to 560 a week, but like a lot of the activity requirements, a lot of the very stringent conditions that are normally attached to receiving payments, those conditions have been relaxed. And so people like are not required to attend, weekly or fortnightly appointments. They're not required to search for non-existent jobs. And of course, at the moment, there are barely any jobs to search for. We all know that. People are not getting their payments cut for, trivial or flimsy reasons. There's no work for the dole. So for the moment, we have a glimpse of like an income support system that actually supports people instead of like harassing and trapping people. And it's a tragedy that it took a pandemic for the government to lift Jobseeker payments above the poverty line and to relax a lot of the strict rules and conditions. And when I say lift Jobseeker payments above the poverty line, let me be clear. Jobseeker payment, now that we have the supplement, the extra 550 a fortnight, that that amount of money is only $10 a week above the poverty line. So let's be clear, even with Jobseeker payment being doubled, like unemployed people in Australia are not rolling in it. Their heads are just above water for the very first time. Unlike many people's cases, for those who are long-term unemployed for the very first time in years. And of course, what we're hearing from people right across the country, and I'm in the privileged position where I'm able to speak to unemployed people right across the country every day. The heart of my role is to get people who are directly affected to take action, to speak to the media, to speak to MPs, to join local action groups, a bit like this one here, and the impact of Jobseeker being doubled in terms of people's health and well-being and like ability to cover their finances has been tremendous. I want to use the word life-changing, and I really, really mean it. When the supplement started at the end of April, which is like a few weeks ago now, but seems like much, much longer, I had people tell me that they were no longer skipping meals. I had a sole parent from Melbourne tell me that with her first supplement payment, like her first like extra payment, like on top of Jobseeker, that she was able to buy a fridge for her and her kids. She's saving up to buy new beds that are not broken. She says that she can catch up on her rent and bills. So what we're seeing is exactly what we've predicted, which is that when you raise people's incomes, people spend that money on like essentials that like allow them to live an adequate and dignified quality of life. I know that wouldn't shock any of you. But it's been quite like heartwarming, but also harrowing, because the doubling of Jobseeker like also reminds us how much people were struggling beforehand. And I think I just want to quickly read you like a few bits of data that, and I'll post this in the group chat. Last week we surveyed 955 people across the country who are on Jobseeker or Youth Allowance. So these are people who would normally be living on $40 a day or on $33 a day, like if you're a student. But because of the coronavirus supplement, their income's been doubled and they're just above the poverty line. So just to give you like a sense of where things are at. This is what people told us. But before the supplement came in, 2/3 of people said that after they paid their rent, they had less than $14 a day to live on. So that's $14 a day to cover bills, food, traveling expenses, medical expenses, like et cetera. 75% of people told us that before the supplement, they were skipping meals, and 20% were skipping at least one meal a day. This is in, one of the richest countries on earth. Things have already like improved. Now only 1/3 of people are skipping meals. Now that's still way too many, obviously. I mean, we shouldn't have anyone like having to skip meals because of a lack of funds. And I think it's a reminder that even with Jobseeker being doubled, it's still actually a really, really modest amount of money. 550 a week. Seems like a lot compared to 280 a week, but the fact is actually that it's only slightly above the poverty line. Before the supplement was doubled, 69% of people said that they were struggling with medical costs, like the cost of prescriptions, the cost of seeing a specialist like a dentist or a physiotherapist. That's now gone down to 41%. Now again, we obviously don't want a situation where anyone is unable to meet their medical needs because of a lack of funds, which I think just goes on to show us how low those payments were to begin with, and B, the huge problems we have with our public healthcare system, where there are so many things that are out of pocket. I might just quickly pause there because there's a couple of questions, quite a few good questions. I just want to see if I can answer any of them. Are people using the extra money to catch up on debts and bills? I think that was a question from Gabby. Yeah, totally. It's something that's came up over and over again. Is and often at that very first payment, at that very first extra payment, the first thing people did was catch up on debts. Like anything that they had, in arrears, that's where that extra 550 would go. So it's a strange situation we're in because on one level, the argument's over. You'll be hard pressed them to find anyone like in Australia who doesn't support permanently raising Jobseeker or Youth Allowance. We've got everyone from Get Up to John Howard and just about everyone in between. It's unusual to have such a strong and wide consensus. And poll after poll after poll tells us that most people get it. Everyone knows you can't live on $40 a day. There's no way to do that without jeopardizing your health and well-being and making it very, very hard for you to keep a roof over your head. As Gabby mentioned, the government are sticking to their line that this supplement is temporary, and there's no intention to extend it past September. But of course, as activists, it's not our job to take the government's word. We have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and we do have a few things going for us, which I think should give us a bit of encouragement. One is, as I said, the battle of public opinion has been won by all of us, and particularly by the unemployed people and by the students right across the country who've been speaking out about the tremendous financial and personal challenges that they've faced living on these payments. So no, there's no debate here. The other thing that I think would be on the government's mind is if the predictions are correct, come September there will be about 1.7 million people on Jobseeker payment, which is twice as many, more than twice as many as there were at the start of March before coronavirus arrived. That's a significant chunk of the labour force and of the voting public, and of course we all know that at a time when the economy is in dire straits, one of the things that you definitely do not want to do is say to 1.7 million people, we're going to take like half your income off of you. We know that would not only be devastating for people's lives, but that's a huge amount of money that's being sucked out of the economy when it could be circulated at, at shops and at all the other places where people are spending the money. So we know there's a pretty overwhelming like economic as well as political case for keeping the supplement. Like, as I said, it's only just above the poverty line. Many grassroots organizations who work with ACOS on the Raise the Rate campaign argue that, like, if anything, the supplement's actually not like an adequate income. Jobseeker plus the supplement is $5.50 a week, and we shouldn't pretend that is actually like enough to live a flourishing life in Australia. I mean, you might be able to keep a roof over your head, but you won't be able to do much in terms of planning. I mean, certainly you'll never be able to take out a loan on like an income that small. That's for sure. And so, like, I realize there's actually lots of really, really good questions coming in. It's actually quite hard to keep up with them. Like, wondering if I should probably like pause for a few minutes, Gabby, and actually
absolutely
like answer them. They're really good questions, and I was going to like answer one, but then like 4 more appeared out of nowhere. So I might just quickly scroll up a bit, and if I miss some of your question, like, feel free to just like unmute your mic and call out or something. So I'm just trying to get to the top. Okay, like I've answered Gabby's question about people using the extra money to catch up on loans and debts.
Jane has one about what help do refugees and people on visas get? Do you have much to do with that side of it, Paz? Or
no, but I did want to say that one of the things that that ACOS has been outraged by is the huge numbers of people who like have no access to a safety net at all, which includes like international students, migrant workers, and refugees. So they've missed out on everything. Like, they've access to no Centrelink payments, and we've said a number of times that's a disgrace, and it's callous to have all of those people who are like a part of our community, and like in many cases, people who've been working here for years and years and paying taxes. Not that that should matter, of course, but short answer is I can't give specific advice about what kinds of services are like available to those people. But just wanted to make the point that while we're fighting to keep Jobseeker above the poverty line, we haven't forgotten all those people who have no access to any safety net at all. So there's so many questions here. I'm just trying to.
How about Meg's? She says she's curious about conversations you've had with newly unemployed people. Have they changed their attitudes about who's deserving of unemployment benefits?
Yeah, certainly, and it's always a huge shock for people who haven't been unemployed before, or like you haven't been unemployed for a very, very long time, realizing how inadequate and dysfunctional the system is. Like, I'm sure you all remember those images from late March, early April, the long queues outside of Centrelink offices right across the country, and the tremendous struggle for people to be able to apply for their payments. and finish their applications. I remember that time quite well because I was actually I'm like helping my mum who had just lost her job. She works in she worked in hospitality. I was helping her to get onto MyGov. You know, she never used a computer before, so it was quite a challenge, and it took us over a month for for her application to be complete. So like I think there's no doubt that there's a huge number of people who are getting a very clear understanding about how hard it is to have to rely on income support payments. And this is during conditions where, like in some ways, things are a little easier. The payment's twice as high as it normally is. There's less paperwork than normal, like a lot of the strict requirements around like how much money do you have in the bank, like how much money does your partner have. All those sorts of rules are being waived to make it as easy as possible for people to apply, but it's still an incredibly frustrating and time-consuming process. I think one of the big questions is many people who've recently lost their jobs will be hoping they can get back into paid work soon, and will probably like expect that to be the case. If, as predicted, the economic downturn is going to be a very long one, you know, many years rather than months, and I think there'll be many people who have to deal with Centrelink as we start to drift back towards the old system where the rules were much stricter, where we had, you know, all the nasty mutual obligation requirements, you know, work for the dole and all the job active appointments. So yeah, there's tremendous potential for us to tap into that new group of people and draw them into the campaign. One of the ways that we've been trying to do that is by holding info sessions on Centrelink and MyGov, and getting Social Security lawyers in to answer questions about all of that. Yeah, like in the conversations I've had with people who've been newly unemployed, again, there's always a real shock about just how awful the system is. But I think maybe many people are not expecting to be long-term unemployed. But you know, sadly, like every time there's an economic downturn, recovery, you know, always takes much longer than people expect, and there are huge numbers of people who lose their jobs, who never work again, and I suspect, sadly, that will be the case again with this crisis.
So thanks, Paz. There are a couple more questions. Jane's just reposted hers about homeless people being placed in temporary accommodation, and is that translating into permanent housing, and are they getting better services from social workers?
Yeah, that's I'm like little outside my area of like expertise. I know like in Adelaide that homeless people who like have been placed like into motels, and I understand that the Don Dunstan Foundation are working on I guess a longer term solution there. So I probably can't really answer that question, but I know there are like a lot of organizations out there that are looking at this. I mean, no one wants a situation where like homeless people like end up back on the streets, you know, 2 or 3 months from now. But yeah, I probably can't answer that question like in any detail. That's a bit outside my area, unfortunately.
Thank you. There's also a couple of just posts, especially from Alex, acknowledging that refugees have absolutely missed out on everything. You know, if you have nothing at all, you're basically forced to rely on like charity and food parcels and try and get what you can for free, which is a really frightening and awful situation for people. They can't afford to go home. And Sue posted earlier that people on disability pensions have also missed out on an increase, and now they're getting less than people on the unemployment benefit. And I would add that has probably created a temptation for people to switch over, which is in the long run a very bad idea, because once you have been deemed fit to work, you know, it's really hard to make a case that you are not.
Yeah, I get phone calls every week from people in the DSP who ask if they should switch over to Jobseeker now that it's higher, and I make it pretty clear that that would be a very like, in my view, like, I think that would be a very dangerous move, because once you get onto the DSP, I mean, you do want to stay on it. Like, anyone who's had to apply for the DSP knows that, I mean, we're talking about like having to jump through hoops. Well, with the DSP, there's about 1 million of them, and the hoops are on fire. You know, it's I mean, you've got to have, you know, tremendous and profound and permanent health conditions to get onto the DSP. Sue's right that it's a disgrace that carers and pensioners who are particularly vulnerable to coronavirus have missed out on the supplements. The government argues that these people didn't need like an extra like income because most of them were not working, so they weren't affected by the economic shutdown. Like, in my view, that's a very weak argument. Many of those people were working casually or part-time. People in the DSP can still work. They're just limited in terms of how many hours of paid work they can do. We know for many people on the DSP or carers payment that they've experienced increases in their expenses during this period. So absolutely, they should have received like extra support. The DSP and the carers payment are actually below the poverty line, and there's no reason why that should be the case. I mean, we saw the government very recently found out that it has an extra 60 billion up their sleeve, and of course only like a very tiny fraction of that would be needed to ensure that carers and pensioners, like unemployed people, are also lifted above the poverty line.
Paz, perhaps we can turn to what you think might happen over the next couple of months. Your best guess, I know it's impossible to predict exactly, but how the politics is going to fall out on this, and related, what types of campaigns are being developed and how can people like us contribute? Yeah. That's a really complicated one, but yeah. I think it's why we tuned in.
Yeah, well, that's the big one, isn't it? I don't have any. My predictions are basically based on very limited info, probably much the same info that all of you have, which is that, yeah, I think there's some pretty powerful reasons why the government will think twice about a snapback. I think politically, the cost of doing that when there's such a huge number of unemployed people, that will give the government pause them to reconsider. I think the economic impacts, the Grattan Institute have modelled what happens if Jobseeker cut by half and goes back to the old rate in September, and it'll be absolutely devastating. I would plunge into like even deeper crisis than we are now. And I like to think both of those reasons mean that I think we have a really, really good chance of getting like either the supplement being like extended for another few or several months, or some kind of permanent raise. Like, of course, we want a significant permanent raise. We don't want Jobseeker to fall back below the poverty line at all. In terms of what we're working on with the campaign, I mean, our strategy is pretty straightforward. There's sort of a few parts to it. I mean, first, we're working really, really hard with people on Jobseeker right across the country to get them speaking out publicly and to get them meeting with their local MP and writing to the two big ones, Morrison and Frydenberg. Frydenberg's office has told us that they're looking for stories about how the supplement has like affected people's ability to keep a roof over their head, and so we're happy to oblige and flood their office with as many stories as possible. But of course, you don't have to be on Jobseeker payment to be part of the campaign. One of the things that I want to make really, really clear is that we all, of course, have a vested interest in a safety net where if we lose our jobs, we can keep paying our rent and bills. So, like, I think, like, for all of you, whether you're unemployed or have recently been unemployed, or even if you've never been unemployed, that there's a real like imperative to add your voice and to contact the coalition. If you don't live in a coalition-like electorate, I can certainly send you some recommendations for coalition senators in South Australia who were working very, very hard to engage. The other thing is that we know that there's a really broad cross-section of people who care about this issue. People on Jobseeker have been leading the way, but we know that like across the country, we've had dozens of local councils who've passed motions calling for a permanent raise to Jobseeker. We've had business groups, local chambers of commerce right across the country who've said that, yeah, this is a no-brainer. Like, how can people like afford to look for work if they can't afford to feed themselves? So one of the things that many of you might want to think about is who in your community, besides them yourself, might have an interest in this issue, because it might surprise you, actually, the people out there who you don't think would have an interest in this topic, but actually, so for example, like, I mean, people get surprised when I mention that the Business Council of Australia and the Australian Industry Group support a raise to Jobseeker. The Australian Medical Association supports a raise to Jobseeker as well. One of the things that we're going to start doing pretty soon is like asking our supporters to actually start talking to their local GP. Of course, if you're a GP, you see firsthand the effects of living on a very low income. The number of people who used to tell me that they had to skip their prescriptions or like ration. I'm like, how often I'd pay for insulin or like other medication was just staggering and like harrowing. We're going to be talking to small businesses, like particularly like in really hard hit areas, and getting them to put up signs in their windows and write to coalition people. What we want to show is that it's not just people who are currently unemployed, like, who care about this. Like, we have an extraordinary diversity of voices, and we want to organise them. So I can send some info to Gabby, like about some of the ideas that we're working on and like who we're going to write to. And we really think there's a chance here. I mean, the government's talking tough, because of course, like no government wants to be, you know, lobbied or pressured on anything. I mean, like it's always their strategy, like to bat us away. But we know that there'll be deep, you know, conversations happening like internally. We've already had members of the coalition, like Pat Connigan from the Central Coast, come out and say that at the very least, the supplement should be extended instead of Jobseeker being cut in half in September. It should continue well into next year. So there are cracks in their armour, and I'd encourage you to all keep chipping away. And we've got some great materials to help people with writing letters and trying to organise meetings. One of the things that we do, which I think is really important, is if someone on Jobseeker organises a meeting with an MP, we try to find them a buddy or like an advocate in their area to come with them, you know, just to make the experience a bit less intimidating. If any of you are interested in playing that supporting role, like helping someone who's currently unemployed to tell their story to an MP or senator, and I'm playing that helping role, I can certainly connect you with people in your area who I think could do with a bit of support. And likewise, if any of you are trying to organise meetings with like MPs about Jobseeker, and you want someone who's currently on Jobseeker to come with you to add that direct experience, please do get in touch, and I'll be more than happy to help. And Gabby will have my contact details, but I can post them in the group chat right now anyway.
Thank you, Paz. We are actually thinking about trying to arrange some meetings with MPs, probably mainly Labor ones, because we've got a little gift for them in that we've ordered a bunch of copies of Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth. And the way that relates back to what you're talking about is that if people were to read the book and understand that spending needed to help people and keep the rate as it is forever, and employ everybody who's unemployed in a job guarantee program, like GetUp's Future to Fight For outlines, it is actually not only possible but essential. So we've got a little campaign going to try and get that book into the hands of decision makers. And if we do have meetings, yes, I think we should try and arrange that we go in small groups, perhaps with somebody with lived experience of being on one of these pre-JobKeeper payments. That would be really powerful, I think. So yeah, something that we could definitely work towards organising. Excellent.
There's a good question by Pam, which I wanted to have a quick shot at answering. The disparity, like in income support payments, this has come up a couple of times. That for the first time, we have an unemployment payment that's higher than the age pension and the disability pension, and that doesn't really make any sense, because we know that people on pensions tend to have higher costs. They tend to spend more on health, for one thing. So I think, what we want is a system where everyone's treated on the basis of their needs, not like according to who is more or less deserving. So before Corona, pre-March, we had a system where pensions were like $170 a week higher than unemployment payments. Now that's a huge gap, and that gap's arguably bigger than what the gap should be pensioners should get more, of course. Like, as I said, they do have greater expenses. But that gap, the reason that gap is there is because of how those payments are indexed. So Jobseeker, like every year, would go up like according to inflation, and the pension would go up like according to the average male weekly wage, which most of the time, probably not at the moment, but most of the time, wages go up at a much faster rate than like inflation, and there's no principled reason why pensions would go up faster than like allowances. It was just the view of many governments that people on pensions are more deserving than unemployed people, and we want to get away from that. Like, let me be really clear: everyone's deserving. And it doesn't matter why you lost your job. Like, it doesn't matter if you lost a job as a coronavirus or bushfires or drought or like health issues, or your company restructured or went offshore or whatever. So I think what we want is a system where all payments are set at above the poverty line, with extra supplements for people with extra medical expenses or people with children. Now, that's obviously not what we have at the moment. We have an incredibly complicated system where payments seem to be based on whether the government likes that group or not, and that's what we want to move away from. That's obviously going to take like huge amount of effort, and in a way that's an even bigger campaign than the Raise the Rate campaign, which I'm a part of. Meg's question, like, is ACOS being invited to the round tables of unions, government and business reps being organised by Christian Porter? No. I'm sure there are lots of questions here that I've missed, so I'm just trying to scroll, but like, I'm happy if someone just wants to like call out if they got a question and I can't find it in the group chat.
Just while you're looking, I posted just a couple of messages back. There's another webinar, Raise the Rate webinar Q&A tomorrow. Is it tomorrow afternoon, Paz?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah. Good reminder. 1:30 South Australian time. I'm very excited about this. We've had well over 200 people register, and the title of the event is basically the theme of the next phase of the Raise the Rate campaign, which is never go back, how to raise the rate of Jobseeker and youth allowance. Let's not forget about students for good. And we've got Jane Caro, the writer, who'll be joining us and speaking about this, this new world. Jobs have vanishing. Many of the jobs that have vanished, almost certainly won't return. The ACOS CEO, Dr. Cassandra Goldie, who many of you will be familiar with, very prominent voice in media debates on poverty and unemployment, will be speaking. But the part I'm actually most excited about, like, as much as I love Jane and Cass, is actually we've got 4 Raise the Rate supporters from across the country, all of them on Centrelink payments, who will be sharing their story about how they got involved in the campaign and the extraordinary work they've done in their local communities. So we've got Peter from Melbourne and Avery from Sydney and Ellen and Shelley from Lismore, who, like, apart from having lived experience, have all been working really hard in their communities to, like, hassle politicians, talk to the media, talk to their local council, their local chamber of commerce even. So that's 1:30 p.m. South Australia time, and we're hoping that people go away feeling a bit inspired and energized, and maybe with a pretty clear sense of what they can do between now and September. So it would be great to see, like, a few of you joining that webinar if you're free. And if not, that's okay, because it will be recorded, and more than happy to send around the recording later on.
So Paz, just perhaps just, sorry, I'm echoing. Just to sum up, before we finish, we've got a few minutes. So the best thing for us to do is to go to the webinar tomorrow if we're able to. Keep in touch with you about visits to politicians. Keep on the lookout for campaign resources, which I will email out when I get them. Anything else?
Yeah, a couple more things. There's the campaign website there at the bottom of the group chat. Like, as I said, I'm more than happy, like for any of you to contact me. But we actually have a contact your MP sign up page on the website. Oh, sorry, Brian, that's 2 p.m. Sydney time, so 1:30 SA time. And if you register with us to contact your MP, we can actually get in touch with you, give you some info, and actually connect you with someone in your area, because we'll have your postcode data, and we can link you with a few buddies. What we found is that coalition MPs are, for obvious reasons, trying to avoid us. They don't like talking about Jobseeker. This is not a good or easy issue for them. They don't like talking to unemployed people because, makes them feel pretty uncomfortable listening to people who've had to skip meals and skip their insulin shots for years and years because of their policy. But of course, it's our job to, kick the door open and force them to listen and be as persistent as possible until they can't ignore us. So that's on the Raise the Rate website. You can sign up there, and there's some resources. That's raisetherate.org.au. But I will send all of that through to Gabby in an email later on.
Thank you. And I would suggest that this is particularly relevant for people in Boothby and also people in Sturt. We have a Liberal member in Sturt, a new person who's taken over from Christopher Pine. I think his name is James Stevens. Yep. He's on a fairly sweet margin. Who knows what that means these days anymore, but he is very quiet on most things. So he might turn out to be perhaps a little bit more open to listening than our mate in Boothby.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, we've had supporters meet with Nicole Flint. Wasn't a good experience, but my sense of James Stevens is that if there are still moderates in the coalition, he's probably one of them. So if you do live in the eastern suburbs, please do write to him or call or try to get a meeting. And we've got some really strong local allies there, like individuals, and also like a few friendly organizations, Uniting Communities and Vinnie's and a few others in the area. So if you live in James's area and want to go after him, go for it. We'll help you out, and you definitely won't be alone either.
I would suggest that's a really good project for people if you live in that electorate and you'd like some help being put in touch. Please just email me or message me. I think wherever you live is a great idea to do this, but Sturt particularly is worth a shot. Boothby as well. So we've come to 8 o'clock. I'd like us to all to thank Paz so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to take everybody off mute and we'll just give you, if I can, where are we? Here we are, participants, unmute. Let's give Paz a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll just stop the recording there. Stop recording.